That's right. It is the post-game show. Brian Smith, Jason Martinez, wrapping up a road trip and a 4-1 win for the Flyers over the Anaheim Ducks. Man, did I want Sam Ersan is how it's said. Okay, thank you. Good job, Jason. Way to work through the phonetics on the live broadcast. I wanted Sam Ersan to get that daggone shutout.
It was that close, was it not? And you kind of felt it coming, too. It was something about the last 2 minutes. The Ducks just kind of turned it on there. And, it was a small victory for them, I guess. But, that was unfortunate that he didn't knock that down. But, everything else that he did on this trip, this second half of it after Christmas was absolutely superb. And again, they're not going against the the highest caliber competition in the world, but at the same time, you got to make good saves against good NHL every team you play. So, it was a tremendous trip for him, and perhaps maybe a little bit of a reconfiguring of what the Flyers are thinking as far as their organizational goaltending situation. Now that they have seen Sam Ersan at the NHL level for an extended period of time, and we'll see what happens when they get back, but he's certainly made a case to supplant Felix Sandstrom as the NHL backup.
Yeah, it's the goaltending flow chart could be in flux.
Yeah, that being said, they could want to get him back. The figure
keep him playing.
Keep him playing in the American Hockey League. Could want to do that. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But again, according to John Tortorella, Carter Hart is healthy and cleared, and still they decided to go with Ersan tonight. So, who knows? Like we were talking about the other night, it's been a long time since we've had a good old-fashioned goaltending controversy in this city. I wouldn't mind seeing one right now.
Well, the thing
spice things up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would like to see in the second half of the season is a little less usage for Hart.
Yeah.
Not because I don't think he's a guy that you can ride, but in this season, I think an important factor is finding out what Sam Ersan or what Felix Sandstrom is. And when they play one of every 7 games, that's hard. It's hard to judge. So I would put them at max on a 4 or 5 to 1 ratio.
Mm-hmm. And again, not to say this has a whole lot to do with it in general, but Felix Sandstrom again I think he had 1 foot back in Sweden last year.
He signed a contract.
He was allegedly going back home, and it was going to kind of give up on the Flyers, and then he made his way back in. And so whether or not, again, it's just a 1-year deal, I believe. If this
2.
Is it a 2? Okay, so they do have him locked up. So it's. What are they going? What are they looking at here long term? I guess is the question. So we'll see what happens. But again, there's a whole lot going on now with this whole situation.
Yeah, and you got to see how Sandstrom now handles this another, piece of competition, because it's another, piece of competition coming from below. You have competition above you that you're to measure to the bar of Carter Hart, and then you're also trying to measure yourself to the bar of the NHL, and now you're trying to measure it to Sam Ersan as well, a countryman of his. So there's a lot of elements here. So the Flyers, Ersan with 28 saves on 29 shots, Flyers with 33 shots. They get their goals in the game from Joel Farabee, Morgan Konechny, Scott Lawton. The assists in the game, Cates ends up with 2 assists in the game. I actually only had him down for 1 here, so let me add another one. Oh, no, I do have him down for 2. Travis Konechny has an assist. Cam York with an assist. Farabee with an assist. 2-point game for Farabee. Kevin Hayes has a couple of apples as well. And, most of these guys, with the exception of Hayes, are all under 25.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. And Frost with a goal, too, under 25. And I'm going to kind of detail these guys' numbers over a certain stretch of time on Flyers Daily. We won't do it here, but Brian, the young guys are the ones that are really leading the way. You're getting some salt and pepper from some of the older guys, but the main course of the meal here, the steak and the potato, has been under 25.
Yeah, and this is, again, Flyers trying to reach that old position of clarity that we came up with. Who do we have here? Who is part of the plans moving forward here, and who's not? And the the one thing they would like to see is for a lot of these, give them some things to think about. Make this good hard decision as opposed to a bad one, which is what they would have if nobody was scoring. That would not be good, obviously, if they didn't have any offense coming from any of these guys. So, again, to kind of try to look at the grand scheme of things, the big picture here. And, again, the ultimate goal here is to win Stanley Cups. And that's probably not happening this year. What you end up with is an opportunity to take a year-long look at a bunch of guys. And what John Tortorella has been trying to do is get them playing a certain way. And, I think that foundation is starting to become more and more second nature to them. And as a result, you're starting to see some of these guys blossom. So we'll see what happens here once they get back home. They've got pretty challenging opponents coming up here in the month of January. And, they'll have an opportunity here to see if there's an organization that can't take the next step.
And they go out to California. Said, Grant, the three teams in California have really been there since '93.
Yes, that's correct.
But that being said, since '93, they had not gone out to California and swept the trip.
Yeah.
And I know two of the teams are down. You look at San Jose and you look at, obviously, this Anaheim team are both down. I mean, the Kings right now are the second team in the Pacific Division. They're a good hockey team. But, you can't determine what your opponents are when you face them. You just got to take care of business when you do face them. And they certainly went out on this trip and took care of business. It looked very businesslike.
And there have been, again, this trip that we talk about, there's two different trips that we can sometimes have at the same time. There's the California trip. Generally, the Flyers will play all California teams on the same trip. They don't always do it, but usually they do. Then there's the holiday trip that we're also in right now, which is between like the 20th of December and the 5th of January or whatever. That trip as well has been hard for the Flyers. I mean, you look back in the last few years, they have lost to some teams that weren't any good at the time on this trip. The 2018-19 Carolina Hurricanes, for instance. Florida, 2017-18. The Buffalo Sabres, they lost to them on that trip that year. You go all the way back, you can pick off games there where, given the way those teams were playing at the time, the Flyers should have won. They just have never really had a whole lot of luck in the last 8 years on this holiday swing either. And so, for them to put it together this time of year and out there, again, they did catch some good teams at good times, but, they will take it. And, it's a big push here to start 2023 off in the right direction. And, again, they're not getting that last overall spot we talked about in the pregame show. Chicago's just too bad. I mean, look at Anaheim tonight. That's what it would look like for the Flyers if they were in full-out tank mode. You really want to sit through a season of that? I mean, it's just not – I don't see any hope over there much at all, with the exception of what we know about some of their young players. It's got to be dreadful. You saw
they
Dallas
had three
Eakins.
Regulation wins, Brian.
Yeah, three. You saw Dallas Eakins a couple times on the bench. Looked like he wanted to jump off it. I mean, it was just, so
if it would have been a couple stories higher, he would have.
Yeah. It's no fun to go through it that way. So, the Flyers are going to have a decent year here where they build a foundation to move forward, and they're going to get a decent draft pick out of it. And if any luck falls their way, it'll be the first overall. We'll see what happens. But, there's a lot of things that I'd rather see tonight that happened in this game and happened on this trip to propel them moving forward. Then I would like to see them, lose all these games in a row.
So the Flyers won their 13th game in regulation in this one. Mm-hmm. Their 13th. We know, Flyer fans, what kind of season this has been.
Yeah.
The Anaheim Ducks have 3 regulation wins in 38 games. I mean, I think that's good. The second worst team in the league is Chicago, and they have 6. They have double the amount of regulation. I mean, that's almost hard to do. I mean, the top team, the Bruins, has 24 regulation wins in the same amount of games.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at that, I mean, the Bruins, or rather the Blackhawks have fewer points than the Ducks do. So it's just, again, the
total wins.
The grand scheme of things. I mean, it is not fun. Even if imagine you sit through a season like that and you don't get that first pick. I mean, it's just not fun. So why go that route if you can avoid it?
No question about it. All right, let's wrap things up. Let's get the music back on the radio. The MMR Rock Radio listeners. But let's thank a few people before we get out of here. Let's start with Ryan Shuttleworth back at the studio. Also on highlights tonight, I'm assuming it was Pancake. They sounded pancake-ish, and he did a nice job as well. For Tim Saunders, Steve Coates, Brian Smith, I'm Jason Martinez. You've been listening to Philadelphia Flyers Hockey, a 4-1 win and 3 straight wins on a West Coast trip on the BetRivers.com Flyers Broadcast Network. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, See ya.